The diplomatic standoff between India and Canada is escalating today. The Indian government has confirmed that it has suspended visa services in Canada temporarily. The confirmation came hours after the announcement was made through a website of a third-party visa application company called BLS International. Even Canadians living outside of Canada will not be able to access India and get visas. MEA spokesperson Arindam Bagchi, while addressing a press conference, has stressed on parity in diplomatic presence as well. He said the government has informed Canada that they do need to reconsider their diplomatic headcount in India, since the number of Indian diplomats in Canada is less than the number of Canadian diplomats on Indian soil. He also said that the Canadian government has not provided any specific information to the Indian government on the Nijjar murder case.
Security threats being faced by our High Commission and consulates in Canada. This has disrupted their normal functioning. Accordingly, our High Commission and consulates are temporarily unable to process visa applications. We will be reviewing the situation on a regular basis. We have informed the Canadian government that there should be parity of strength and rank equivalence in our diplomatic presence, our mutual diplomatic presence. We think that the numbers are much higher, and those details are being worked out, and we think that hence the number there'll be reduction. So yes, I presume this is pursuant to our conversation or request.
Our colleague Parikshit Luthra is standing by with us. He was at the press briefing. Parikshit, many thanks for joining us. I want to pick up on that second issue of parity, because when we heard from the Canadian Embassy this morning, the Canadian Embassy suggested that they were looking at rationalizing their headcount, but they didn't seem to indicate that it was on account of India asking them to do so, which is what the spokesperson of the MEA seemed to indicate.
Well, this all seems to be diplomatic pressure coming from the Indian side, and there will be a lot of comments like these in the days to come. The Indian government has gone on to say that we have very few diplomats in Canada, in our High Commission and consulates, and Canada has way more. So this issue has never been taken up in the past before. But because of the issues that we have seen with Indian diplomats being expelled, the fire incident at the Indian embassy in Canada, now the Indian government is upping the offensive and is saying that you need to reduce the number of diplomats here, send these diplomats back. And what we are hearing informally from our sources is that the Canadian embassy is being urged to drastically and significantly reduce headcount here in its missions. The Canadian side, of course, defending itself, saying that this is because of threats that these diplomats were facing on social media. So this kind of war of words would continue. On the visa front, this is a very significant move, because India has really stepped up the offensive against Canada, and this is a move which could affect Indian nationals as well, because we've got a large number of students, large number of Indians applying for visas to work in Canada. But those who have an existing visa status, those who are already in Canada with active visas, those students and professionals are not going to be impacted. But for all new visa applicants, including e-visa applicants, all categories will be suspended temporarily, and a reciprocal move is also expected from the Canadian side very soon. We can also tell our viewers that the MEA has taken this up with allies, some of the G7 countries, to counter the offensive, the diplomatic offensive that has been launched by the Canadian government with the Five Eyes partners.
All right, Parikshit, many thanks for joining us. Let's go across to former diplomat Ambassador Anil Trigunath. He's with us. Also, Raymond Vickery, Senior Associate at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Gentlemen, appreciate you joining us here on the program. Ambassador Trigunath, let me start by addressing the two developments that have taken place today. The Indian government temporarily deciding to suspend visa operations in Canada, but the manner in which the announcement came in didn't come in from the government. It was put up by the service provider, a third party, on its website, then taken down, then put back up, and now a confirmation coming in from the Indian government saying temporary suspension on account of security considerations. Do you see this as a provocative escalation, or do you believe that given the real security considerations, India's concerns are legitimate, warranted, and hence perhaps we would not see reciprocal action from Canada?
Well, I think that these are standard practices when you do not have great confidence in the security that is being provided by the country concerned, which is the host for the Indian diplomatic mission. And therefore, it is normal because visa section normally and the visa agencies that we hire or third-party agencies, they become direct threats in that sense. And it has happened everywhere. And therefore, it is normal to scale down till the time that you are able to secure the place. That is one. Secondly, it is also to convey the message that the Canadian citizens basically will have to wait till such time that the situation improves. I mean, that is normal in this case because the relationship has really gone down. And I think that because Mr. Trudeau chose to make a public statement without any evidence and without accusing India of the kind of terror, I mean, the extrajudicial killing of a terrorist in the country rather than taking those terrorists. It's been going on for the last 40 years and it has escalated. As far as the reduction in the numbers is concerned, it is again a standard protocol. Sometimes to our friends, we allow more diplomats to come, but there is a understanding, a written understanding, that if you are going to bring in 10 diplomats, we have the right to post 10 diplomats there in your country as well. We may not do so because of many reasons. But then
Right. And that was the point that was being made by the External Affairs Ministry spokesperson, the need for parity, and which is probably why we will see Canada having to reduce its diplomatic headcount in India. Raymond Vickery, many thanks for joining us. How do you read where things currently stand? As Ambassador Trigunath was pointing out, it is a new low as far as Indo-Canada relations are concerned. And more importantly, how do you believe the G7 is now likely to assess a response to the current developments?
Well, thanks very much for having me. I think that in the first place, you have to say that Prime Minister Trudeau making these kinds of very serious accusations without presenting any facts is irresponsible under the circumstances. You just don't do that. That's trying to place India in the same category as Russia that's been conducting these kinds of operations for years, assassinations. In fact, one of my friends says, well, Russia has an open window policy, referring to people being put out of windows. So it's irresponsible to do that, and it's very, very serious. I think it's important to understand that in a democracy like Canada or India or United States, this is not like Russia or China, where the word of the top guy really reflects the sentiment of the nation. And in fact, you've already seen some statements from the opposition leaders saying, where are the facts? My view is that what is happening is very tragic in the sense that it obviously provokes the kind of retaliation and tit for tat. Canada, I think, has to understand that this is a very, very serious situation. Khalistani separatism has caused many, many deaths going back to the time when I was in government. I remember talking with Ambassador S.S. Ray at the time, had been governor of Punjab, about how difficult it was. So this is an obvious escalation, and the whole business about security and so forth, it seems to me, is really secondary to what's going on in this regard. I do think that the allies, if you will, and the G7, the Five Eyes, have taken a very, very standoff position from what Prime Minister Trudeau has done. I don't think there's really any question that the kind of diplomatic initiative that he tried to bring with G7 and the Five Eyes has not gotten on board because there are no facts. If there are facts, that's an indifferent situation entirely.
Yeah, and let's just pick up on that, Ambassador Trigunath, because as we heard there from Raymond Vickery, and the point was being made today in the press briefing by the External Affairs Ministry as well, when asked if there were any specific instances or any specific evidence that was brought to the table by Prime Minister Trudeau when he met the Prime Minister here for the G20 summit, the answer was no. So given what we just heard there from Raymond Vickery, that so far the response from the G7, from Canada's allies, has been somewhat of a distant reaction and a distant response, do you expect that to continue, or do you believe that Canada is now going to find itself more and more isolated?
Well, I think that I don't see that Canada will find isolated as far as G7 is concerned, because they are a grouping, a pretty strong grouping. But at the same time, they might try to tell Trudeau to slow down, and if he has any facts, must present those facts. And there are ways to do it among friends. The problem is that the government of India has made many requests in the last several years. And during the two Trudeau regimes, his father and himself, none of these have materialized into any single extradition, which clearly shows that the government, in one way or the other, is trying to help the extremists, terrorists, and separatists from their soil. Besides his own actions, for example, during the farmers' unrest, or for that matter, when he visited India in 2018, he brought along an extremist and a separatist leader with him in his delegation. And once again, when he was here, he tried to talk to Prime Minister Modi and tell him that, look, this is what we suspect. Now, suspicions, you cannot stake a country's reputation on the basis of this. India is a country that has suffered for more than 40 years from terrorism. And this is something that we would have to continue to fight, instead of taking care of the terrorists and extremists in his own home, who are nobody's buddies, frankly. They are going to eventually hit back on him. Yeah. And that's precisely the case. And if he's so happy about these terrorists and extremists and separatists, why doesn't he make British Columbia, convert it into a state of Khalistan and be done with it?
Right, Raymond Vickery, let me end by asking you, given the fact that so far, as far as the allies are concerned, in your words, it's been a standoffish response, a distance being maintained. Do you believe that the allies may ensure or force a dialing down on the part of Justin Trudeau and his government?
Well, I don't think anybody's going to force Canada to do anything. But you have to understand that we're talking about a nation of only 40 million people, in which the percentage of Sikhs is higher than it is in India. And you're talking about a person whose poll numbers are extremely bad going into elections in the following year. So all of those factors have to be taken into account. But it seems to me that in terms of going forward, it's the great values shared by India, the United States, Canada, and others that should resolve this situation. And that is that you don't make unfounded, non-due process kinds of statements. So I see this as turmoil, but I do think that the rest of the G7, the members of the Quad, all of those groupings are very, very skeptical of what's happened. Everybody is in favor of freedom of speech. It's in the Indian Constitution. It's in the U.S. Constitution. But this goes to the question of how we build peace and prosperity among like-minded democracies, and it's a very, very unfortunate situation.
That it certainly is. Raymond Vickery, Ambassador Trigunath, many thanks for joining us to take us through your assessment of the developments that have taken place today. A new low as far as the Indo-Canadian relationship is concerned, but this is, of course, a developing story, and we will keep you updated as we hear more from both sides. Thank you very much for your time. We are going to take a break here on the News Centre. The news will continue. Stay right there. We're back in a moment.